Have you ever stopped to think about why some people seem impossible to fool? Not because they are geniuses, not because they have more degrees, not because they went to better schools. And yet, when everyone else follows the crowd, they see something different. When experts disagree, they remain calm. When trends come and go, they are not shaken. They think for themselves. Centuries ago, a Japanese samurai was asked what separated a true warrior from an ordinary man. His answer was unexpected. He said that most people borrow their thoughts from others. A warrior learns to create his own. Today, that difference may be more important than ever. We live in the most educated age in human history. More books, more courses, more podcasts, more information. And yet, anxiety is rising. Attention spans are shrinking. People spend hours scrolling, but struggle to focus for 10 minutes. We consume knowledge all day long, yet somehow feel less certain about what is true, less confident in our own judgment, less capable of thinking deeply. The truth is, the problem was never a lack of information. The problem is a lack of understanding. The truth is, the problem was never that we don't learn enough. The problem is that we rarely learn deeply. And you are not alone in this. Millions of people feel trapped in the same cycle. Reading more, watching more, saving videos for later, promising themselves that one day everything will finally click. But it never does. Because consumption feels like progress, even when no real understanding is taking place. Modern neuroscience is beginning to confirm what ancient Eastern traditions understood centuries ago. Researchers from Harvard and Stanford have repeatedly found that genuine learning happens when the brain struggles with ideas, reconstructs them, tests them, and applies them, not when it passively consumes information. In other words, knowledge is not built by collecting. It is built by wrestling with understanding. And this brings us to a forgotten Japanese approach to mastery, a way of learning that shaped scholars, craftsmen, samurai, and masters for generations. A system designed not to fill your mind with information, but to transform the way your mind works. In today's video, I'm going to tell you the story of a young man named Ren, 27 years old, a software engineer living in Tokyo. By most standards, he was highly educated. He had read hundreds of books, finished countless courses, listened to productivity experts every day. Yet, he carried a secret frustration. The more he learned, the less certain he felt. The more information he consumed, the harder it became to think clearly. What happened next completely changed the way he approached knowledge, learning, and life itself. And through his journey, you will discover 4 ancient principles that can help you build something modern education rarely creates. A mind that thinks independently. A mind that cannot be easily manipulated. A mind shaped by depth rather than noise. Welcome to the channel, where we build a community around timeless wisdom and practical mastery. If you want to master your mind instead of being controlled by distractions, subscribe and turn on notifications. And before we begin, leave a comment below. What is the one thing you have been trying to learn, but still don't feel like you truly understand? Because after this video, you will never look at learning the same way again, and I will show you exactly how this system works. Chapter 1. The Man Who Could Not Think for Himself. In today's video, I'm going to tell you the story of a man named Ren, 27 years old, living in Tokyo, working as a software engineer for one of the fastest-growing technology companies in the city. From the outside, Ren looked successful. Good salary, modern apartment, promising career. The kind of life many people spend years trying to build. But there was a problem nobody around him could see. Every morning, the same ritual began. Before his feet touched the floor, he reached for his phone. Notifications, emails, news, podcasts, videos, more information. Always more information. His mind was busy before the day had even started. And every night ended the same way. Another book chapter, another productivity video, another list of ideas he promised himself he would apply someday. Someday. That word followed him everywhere. Someday he would become more disciplined. Someday he would start his own project. Someday he would finally feel confident in what he knew. But someday never arrived. Weeks became months. Months became years. And despite consuming more knowledge than ever before, his life barely changed. The strange thing was that Ren genuinely loved learning. He wasn't lazy. He wasn't careless. He wasn't wasting his time. At least, that's what he believed. Yet something felt wrong. The more information he consumed, the more overwhelmed he became. The more experts he listened to, the less he trusted his own judgment. Every new book seemed to contradict the last one. Every new idea created another layer of confusion. He began to notice something unsettling. Whenever someone asked for his opinion on a difficult problem, he automatically searched for what an expert would say. Whenever he faced an important decision, he looked for another book, another course, another answer from someone else. He had trained himself to collect knowledge, but not to think. And that distinction would change everything. One evening, after finishing yet another highly recommended book on personal development, Ren closed the cover and stared at the wall. A simple question entered his mind, a question that made him deeply uncomfortable. If all these books disappeared tomorrow, how much would I actually understand? Not remember, not recognize, understand. For the first time in years, he didn't have an answer. And that was the moment the real journey began. Chapter 2. The Collapse. At first, Ren thought the solution was simple. Learn more, read more, consume more. If one book didn't provide the answer, the next one would. If one expert couldn't solve the problem, another expert could. That belief became his operating system, and for a while, it felt productive. Every week he finished another book. Every month he completed another course. His shelves filled with knowledge, his mind filled with information. But his life remained strangely unchanged. The gap kept growing. The gap between what he knew and what he actually did. Every morning he created ambitious plans. Wake up earlier, study harder, launch a side project, exercise consistently, become the person he imagined he could be. Every evening he broke those promises. Not because he lacked intelligence, not because he lacked ambition, because he was exhausted, silently exhausted. The kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from physical labor, the kind that comes from carrying too many unfinished thoughts, too many competing ideas, too many voices inside your head. One expert said, focus on discipline. Another said, focus on motivation. One book praised balance. Another praised obsession. One podcast encouraged patience. The next demanded urgency. Ren was drowning in advice, and the deeper he went, the more confused he became. Something inside him was beginning to fracture. The certainty he once had about his future slowly disappeared. Decision after decision became harder. Simple choices felt heavy. What should he study next? Which skill mattered most? Which path was the right one? He spent hours researching answers, days comparing options, weeks preparing, but rarely acting. This is the trap most people never recognize. They believe they are learning, but they are actually hiding. Hiding inside preparation, hiding inside information, hiding from the discomfort of action. And because preparation feels productive, the illusion continues. Months passed. Then one night something happened. Ren sat alone in his apartment, 3 screens glowing in front of him, a productivity course playing on one monitor, notes open on another, a half-finished book beside his desk. He stared at all of it, and suddenly felt nothing. No excitement, no motivation, no curiosity, only emptiness. For the first time, he admitted a truth he had avoided for years. He was not becoming wiser. He was becoming dependent. Dependent on constant input, dependent on experts, dependent on information. He had spent years strengthening his ability to consume, but almost no time strengthening his ability to think. And that realization hit harder than any failure. Because the truth is, the problem was never a lack of knowledge. The problem was the absence of understanding. And until that changed, nothing else would. What Ren did not know was that this breakdown was about to become the most important moment of his life. Chapter 3. The Encounter. 3 days after that night, Ren did something unusual. He stopped listening. No podcast, no audiobook, no video playing in the background. Just silence. It felt uncomfortable, almost painful, as if his mind had forgotten how to exist without constant stimulation. On a rainy Saturday afternoon, he wandered through an older district of Tokyo. No destination, no purpose, just walking, trying to escape the noise inside his own head. Eventually, he found himself standing in front of a small second-hand bookstore tucked between two aging buildings. The sign above the entrance was faded. The windows were dusty. Most people would have walked past without noticing it. Ren stepped inside. The smell of old paper filled the air. The store was nearly empty. Only one customer sat quietly near the back, an elderly man reading beside a wooden table. Ren drifted through the narrow aisles without much interest, until one book caught his attention. It wasn't new. It wasn't famous. The cover was worn from decades of use. The title translated roughly to The Discipline of Understanding. Something about it felt different. He opened the first page. A handwritten note had been left inside. Just one sentence. Most people collect knowledge. Few people transform because of it. Ren froze. It felt as if someone had written directly to him. Interesting book. A voice interrupted his thoughts. The elderly man had approached quietly. His name was Satoshi. 72 years old, former professor, student of Japanese philosophy for more than 4 decades. Satoshi looked at the book in Ren's hands and smiled. Most people buy books hoping to find answers, he said. The rare few buy books because they are ready to question themselves. Ren laughed awkwardly. I'm not sure which one I am. Satoshi nodded. Neither are most people. Then he asked a question, a simple question, one that Ren would remember for years. Tell me, of all the books you've read, how many changed the way you actually live? Ren opened his mouth, then stopped. He thought about hundreds of books, thousands of pages, years of studying, years of searching, yet almost nothing came to mind. Satoshi saw the answer on his face and nodded again. Good. Ren looked confused. Good? Yes, because most people spend their lives avoiding that realization. He pointed toward the old book. The problem is not that you know too little. The problem is that you have never learned how to understand. The words landed heavily. For the first time, Ren felt something he had not felt in years. Not motivation, not inspiration. Clarity. A feeling that somewhere inside this conversation was the missing piece he had been searching for. What he did not know was that this meeting would lead him to a Japanese principle so powerful, it would completely transform the way he thought, learned, and lived. Chapter 4. The first principle, Kaizen and the illusion of progress. Satoshi closed the book. Then he asked Ren a question. How do you think a mountain is climbed? Ren shrugged. One step at a time. Satoshi smiled. Everyone says that. Almost nobody understands it. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Rain tapped softly against the bookstore window. Then Satoshi pulled a small notebook from his pocket. The pages were worn, filled with decades of observations, ideas, mistakes, lessons. On one page, a single word was written: Kaizen. This, Satoshi said, is where your transformation begins. Ren had heard the word before. Most people have. It appears in business books, productivity seminars, corporate training programs. Continuous improvement, small daily progress. That was the common explanation. But Satoshi shook his head. No, that is only the surface. The real meaning is much deeper. He leaned forward. Most people try to change their lives through intensity. A burst of motivation, a dramatic decision, a complete reinvention. They want to become a different person overnight. Ren nodded. That sounded familiar. Every new book he read produced the same reaction. A surge of excitement, a list of ambitious goals, a promise that this time would be different. And then, a few days later, nothing. Back to old habits, back to old patterns, back to the same frustration. Satoshi saw the recognition in his eyes. The truth is, the problem was never a lack of motivation. The problem was dependence on motivation. Those words hit hard, because Ren suddenly realized something. His entire learning journey had been built on emotional highs. When motivation appeared, he studied intensely. When motivation disappeared, everything stopped. His progress depended on feelings, and feelings are unreliable. Satoshi opened the notebook again. Kaizen teaches the opposite. Never trust intensity, trust repetition. He pointed toward the bookstore door. Imagine two people. One studies 6 hours in a single day and quits for the next month. The other studies 20 minutes every day. Who becomes the master? The answer was obvious. Yet almost nobody lives that way. Because the human mind loves dramatic change. It loves excitement. It loves quick results. What it struggles to appreciate is the quiet power of consistency. The invisible progress happening beneath the surface. Like roots growing before a tree appears. Like water shaping stone. Slow, patient, relentless. For the first time, Ren understood why he had been stuck for so many years. He had been chasing breakthroughs, while ignoring systems, chasing inspiration, while avoiding repetition, chasing results, while neglecting process. And then, Satoshi revealed the lesson that changed everything. Your future is not built by what you do occasionally. It is built by what you repeat. Ren sat silently. The bookstore seemed quieter than before, because deep down, he knew something important had happened. This was no longer a conversation about learning. It was a conversation about identity. And this was only the first principle. Chapter 5. The Relapse. The next morning, Ren decided to begin. Not next week, not next month, today. For the first time in years, he ignored the urge to create a massive plan. No complicated system, no color-coded schedule, no 20-step morning routine. Just one commitment, 20 minutes, every day. One subject, one notebook, one focused session, nothing more. At first, it felt almost ridiculous. 20 minutes? Could something so small really matter? Part of him wanted to do more. Much more. But he remembered Satoshi's words, never trust intensity, trust repetition. So he stayed with the process. Day 1, 20 minutes. Day 2, 20 minutes. Day 3, 20 minutes. For a while, it worked. Something was changing. The sessions felt deeper. His thinking became clearer. For the first time, he wasn't rushing through information. He was sitting with ideas, examining them, questioning them, making them his own. Then reality arrived. A difficult week at work, unexpected deadlines, late-night meetings, stress, fatigue, the same forces that had destroyed his habits before. On Tuesday, he skipped a session. On Wednesday, he skipped another. By Friday, the notebook remained untouched, and something familiar returned. Guilt. The voice inside his head immediately began its attack. You failed again. You never change. You're exactly the same. The old pattern was back. All or nothing thinking. One mistake becomes total collapse. One missed day becomes quitting completely. Most people know this feeling. One unhealthy meal becomes a bad week. One missed workout becomes a lost month. One mistake becomes an excuse to abandon the entire journey. And that is where most transformations die. Not because of failure, because of the meaning people attach to failure. 3 days later, Ren returned to the bookstore, ashamed, frustrated, certain he had disappointed himself once again. Satoshi listened quietly, then smiled. Good. Ren stared at him. Good? I stopped for 3 days. I failed. Satoshi shook his head. No. You practiced. Ren frowned. I don't understand. The old man leaned forward. Who told you the path would be perfect? Who told you discipline means never falling? Silence. Then Satoshi spoke the lesson Ren would never forget. The disciplined person is not the one who never breaks. The disciplined person is the one who returns. Those words landed differently, because suddenly Ren saw the truth. The goal had never been perfection. The goal had always been return. Return after distraction. Return after stress. Return after failure. Return after doubt. Anyone can perform when conditions are perfect. Very few can continue when conditions are not. That evening, Ren opened his notebook again. Not because he felt motivated. Not because he felt inspired. Because he had made a decision. A decision stronger than emotion. He wrote for 20 minutes. Nothing extraordinary happened. No breakthrough. No sudden transformation. But something far more important occurred. For the first time, he stopped identifying as someone trying to build discipline and started becoming someone who practiced it. One day, one return, one small step at a time. The path had finally begun. Chapter 6. Why your brain fights your growth. But there was something Ren still didn't understand. Why was consistency so difficult? Why did his mind constantly pull him back toward old habits? Why did doing the right thing often feel harder than doing nothing at all? A week later, he asked Satoshi exactly that. The old man smiled. Because you are not fighting laziness. You are fighting biology. Ren frowned. Biology? Satoshi nodded. Then he drew two simple circles on a sheet of paper. The first is the amygdala. The second is the prefrontal cortex. And most people spend their entire lives being controlled by the first. The amygdala is one of the oldest survival systems in the human brain. Its job is simple. Conserve energy, avoid uncertainty, seek immediate comfort. Thousands of years ago, this kept our ancestors alive. Today, it often keeps people stuck. Every time Ren sat down to study deeply instead of scrolling social media, his brain detected resistance. Every time he chose focused work over instant entertainment, his brain perceived a small threat. Not because learning was dangerous, because learning was unfamiliar. And the amygdala prefers familiar discomfort over unfamiliar growth. This is why so many people quit. Not because they lack potential, because they misunderstand the battle. They think something is wrong with them. In reality, their brain is simply doing what it evolved to do. Avoid effort, seek reward, repeat. But there was another system, the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for planning, decision-making, self-control, long-term thinking. The version of you that wants a better future lives here. The problem? This part of the brain becomes stronger only through use. Like a muscle. Ignore it, and it weakens. Challenge it, and it grows. This is where Kaizen becomes powerful. Most people try to transform their lives through massive action. The brain sees danger. Resistance explodes. The habit collapses. Kaizen bypasses that resistance. Small actions feel safe. Small actions create repetition, and repetition changes the brain. This process has a name: neuroplasticity. The brain's ability to physically rewire itself based on repeated behavior. Every time Ren returned to his 20-minute practice, a small neural pathway strengthened. Every time he resisted distraction, another pathway grew stronger. The changes were invisible, but they were real. Like water carving a canyon one drop at a time. Satoshi looked at him. The person you become is not decided by motivation. It is decided by repetition. And suddenly everything made sense. His failures, his relapses, his frustration. The problem was never a lack of willpower. The problem was expecting transformation before rewiring. The truth is, the problem was never that change is impossible. The problem is that most people quit before the brain has time to change. And once Ren understood that, he stopped asking how fast he could transform and started asking a far more powerful question. What can I repeat today? Conclusion: the mind you build. Years after walking into that small bookstore, Ren was no longer searching for the next secret, no longer chasing the next breakthrough. no longer collecting information for the sake of feeling productive. Something had changed. Quietly, gradually, almost invisibly, but permanently. And when people met him, they noticed it immediately. Not because he had become the smartest person in the room, but because he had become one of the few people capable of thinking for himself. That is what this journey was really about. Not knowledge, not productivity, not self-improvement. Independence. The ability to stand in a noisy world and think clearly. The ability to understand deeply instead of consuming endlessly. The ability to build a mind that belongs to you. So before we finish, let's remember the lessons that transformed Ren's life. The first principle was Kaizen. Small steps. Consistent steps. The understanding that dramatic change rarely lasts, but repeated action changes everything. The second lesson was equally important. Stop chasing perfection. Perfection is fragile. Perfection breaks. The disciplined person is not the one who never falls. The disciplined person is the one who returns, again, and again, and again. The third lesson came from neuroscience itself. Your brain changes through repetition. Every action strengthens a pathway. Every distraction strengthens another. You become what you repeatedly do, not what you occasionally intend. And that brings us to the most important question. Not what Ren did, not what Satoshi taught. What will you do? Because information changes nothing. Action changes everything. This is where most people stop. They watch the video. They feel inspired. They agree with every word. Then tomorrow arrives, and nothing changes. Do not let that be you. Instead, I want to give you a challenge, a 14-day challenge. Simple, small, powerful. For the next 14 days, choose one thing that matters, one skill, one habit, one area of growth. Then spend just 20 minutes every day working on it. No excuses, no perfection, no restarting. If you miss a day, return the next day. That is the challenge. Not intensity, consistency. And at the end of those 14 days, notice what has changed. Not only in your results, but in your identity. Because every time you return, you cast a vote for the person you are becoming. Now ask yourself this. What is the one area of your life where you have been waiting for motivation, instead of building a system? What would happen if you stopped waiting? What would happen if you started today? The truth is, the problem was never a lack of potential. The problem was never a lack of intelligence. The problem was never a lack of opportunity. The problem was believing that change would happen someday. And you are not alone in this. Most people spend years waiting. The few who transform begin before they feel ready. So don't wait until next Monday. Don't wait until next month. Don't wait until life becomes easier. Start today. Thank you for watching until the end. If this video helped you see yourself differently, leave a comment below and tell us the one habit, skill, or discipline you are committing to for the next 14 days. Subscribe for more timeless wisdom tested by history and strengthened by modern science. And remember, be present, walk with honor, follow the path.